When you say someone has a skeleton in their closet, you usually mean they're hiding some kind of bad secret.
Right, yeah, like a botched project at work, or maybe a really disastrous relationship.
Exactly. Or, maybe a quiet firing that they conveniently left off their resume. It's just a completely sanitized, everyday metaphor that we use all the time.
Yeah, totally. We don't even think about it.
But what if I told you that about 200 years ago, that phrase wasn't really a metaphor at all?
That's the crazy part, yeah.
Like, I want you to imagine you're this prominent, wealthy member of society, right? You're hosting a fancy dinner party while simultaneously and quite literally shoving human remains into your cupboards before the neighbors arrive.
It sounds like a horror movie.
It really does. So today's deep dive is all about, well, unsanitizing our language. Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking into the incredibly dark, terrifyingly literal origins of a phrase you probably used this morning.
And, to really grasp how a phrase like this is born, we have to pry open that closet door, so to speak, and step back into 19th century Britain.
Yes, the 1800s.
Right, because you are absolutely right to be suspicious of this idiom. I mean, it didn't just appear out of thin air, It was forged in a very real, very physical world that was grappling with some deeply uncomfortable realities.
Okay, so let's start with the paper trail. Because before we can figure out why a phrase was invented, we have to establish the timeline of when it first appeared in the wild.
A linguistic archaeology.
Exactly. So looking at the sources, the Oxford English Dictionary, which is like the gold standard for this kind of stuff, they draw the starting line at 1845.
Right, the 1845 citation.
Yeah. It was the novelist William Makepeace Thackeray, the guy who wrote Vanity Fair.
Ah, yes, a massive cultural touchstone.
Right. So he used a variation of the phrase in his writing. He wrote about, quote, a skeleton in the house.
Which, is an excellent documented starting point. But the thing about language is, well, it rarely just pops into existence fully formed in the pages of a published mainstream novel, right?
Right. It doesn't just start with the best-selling author.
Exactly. So etymologists are always digging deeper into these historical archives. And a researcher named Gary Martin, he actually unearthed an even earlier attestation of the concept.
Oh, really? How much earlier?
He found it in this relatively obscure essay from 1816.
Wow, 1816.
Yeah, written by an English Congregationalist writer named William Henry Stoll.
Okay, so 1816, that pushes the timeline back almost 30 years before Thackeray.
It does, yes.
But wait, if some obscure essayist is just throwing this phrase into a piece of writing in 1816, he's definitely not inventing it on the spot, right?
Right, chance.
Like, you don't use a highly specific metaphor in an essay unless you expect your audience to already know what you're talking about.
You've hit the nail on the head. He was relying on shared cultural imagery. The phrase was already percolating in the groundwater of British English by that point.
It totally reminds me of trying to find the origin of a viral internet meme today.
Oh, that's a great way to think about it.
Right. Like, the 1845 Thackeray novel is like the first time a major news outlet finally publishes an article explaining the meme to the masses.
Yes.
But the 1816 essay is like digging through some old Reddit forum and finding it people casually dropping the meme in everyday conversation.
Exactly. The concept was codified in the culture long before the dictionary officially recognized it.
Right.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. The mechanics of linguistic spread haven't actually changed much, just the speed at which it happens. So the timeline firmly anchors us in the early 1800s.
Which brings up a massive question for me.
Lay it on me.
If people are casually throwing around the idea of hidden skeletons in 1816 Britain, what on earth was happening in society right then?
Hola.
Like, was there some high-profile, scandalous murder trial where someone actually found a body shoved in a wardrobe?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't just one isolated murder. It was an entire booming underground industry.
Wait, an industry?
Yeah. This is where we have to look at the rather grim mechanics of 19th century British medical science.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So in the late 1700s and early 1800s, medicine was undergoing this massive shift. For centuries, doctors mostly learned by, well, just reading ancient texts.
Right. Very theoretical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But suddenly, there was this intense push for practical, empirical observation. Surgeons and anatomists realized they desperately needed human cadavers to dissect.
So they could actually see what they were doing.
Right. So they could understand how the body actually worked before they try to operate on a living, breathing patient.
I mean, that makes total sense. If I'm going under the knife, I definitely want my surgeon to have looked under the hood a few times before they start cutting into me. But surely people were dying all the time back then. Why couldn't they just use people who, donated their bodies to science.
Well, because the legal concept of donating your body to science essentially didn't exist yet.
Oh, it didn't.
No, not really.
Yep.
And here is where we hit the massive bottleneck. Under the Murder Act of 1752, the only bodies legally allowed to be dissected by anatomists were those of executed murderers.
Wait, just murderers?
Just murderers. It was considered a further punishment beyond death, like the ultimate desecration of the body.
So the only legal supply of bodies for every single medical school in Britain was the handful of murderers executed each year.
Correct. And as medical schools expanded, because this empirical method was getting popular, the demand for cadavers massively outstripped the legal supply.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Yeah. A single anatomy class could require dozens of bodies a semester, and they're only getting a few a year legally.
So when demand skyrockets and the legal supply is artificially capped like that, you instantly create a black market.
A highly, highly lucrative black market. This desperation is what birthed the era of the underhand dealers, the people who became known as the body snatchers.
The body snatchers.
Or, a bit more theatrically, they called themselves the resurrectionists.
The resurrectionists. I mean, it sounds like some dark secret society, but really we're just talking about grave robbers, right?
Essentially, yes. Grave robbers.
How did they even operate? I can't imagine it's easy to dig up a grave in the middle of a crowded city without anyone noticing.
It wasn't, which is why it was a highly specialized, incredibly fast operation. They wouldn't dig up the whole grave, for starters.
Absolutely wouldn't.
No, it takes too long. They would wait for a fresh burial, sneak in under the cover of darkness, and they'd use wooden spades.
Wooden spades? Oh, to minimize the noise of digging.
Exactly. Metal on stone is too loud. So they dig this small shaft just at the head of the coffin.
Just the head?
Wow. And then they take a crowbar, snap off the top third of the wooden lid, and then literally just use ropes to hoist the body out by the neck or under the arms.
That is horrifying. That is an awful mental image.
It was a brutal business.
But, okay, here is the detail from the research that completely short-circuited my brain.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
Tell me if I'm getting this right. Digging up a dead body and hauling it away in the middle of the night wasn't actually illegal.
You read that right. It is one of the most bizarre legal loopholes in British history.
How is that possible?
Well, you have to look at how English common law conceptualized human remains at the time. Historically, a corpse rested under ecclesiastical or church jurisdiction.
Okay, church law.
Right. The belief was that the body was simply waiting in the ground for the day of resurrection.
Meaning the law didn't view it as an object.
Exactly. It wasn't property. Legally speaking, a dead body belonged to no one.
That is wild.
It had no monetary value under the law, and therefore it couldn't be owned. And if something can't be owned, taking it cannot be classified as theft.
So the law basically said, well, it's not property, so we can't charge you with stealing it.
Precisely. It was considered a misdemeanor, at best. Usually they classified it as outraging public decency.
Outraging public decency, not a felony.
Not a felony. And the resurrectionists, they knew the law perfectly. This entirely dictates how they operated.
How so?
Well, when they hoisted a body out of a grave, they would strip it completely naked. They would throw the burial shroud and any jewelry right back into the coffin before filling the hole.
Hold on. Why would they leave the valuables behind? That seems completely counterintuitive for a thief.
Because taking the corpse wasn't a felony, but taking the linen burial shroud or a silver ring that was.
Oh my God.
Because the clothes were considered the property of the family. If they stole the shroud, they could be hanged or transported to Australia for grand larceny.
Unbelievable.
But if they just took the naked body, they'd get a slap on the wrist.
That is a staggering level of criminal calculation.
Very calculated.
Okay, so the grave robbers aren't facing severe legal penalties for the bodies. But I'm assuming the general public didn't just casually accept this legal loophole?
Oh, absolutely not.
Right, because if I catch someone digging up my relative in the middle of the night, legal loophole or not, I am forming a mob.
And mobs did form. The public was absolutely terrified and outraged by this. I mean, it was a massive moral taboo.
I can imagine.
The very idea of your loved one being carved up on a table instead of resting in peace, it was deeply traumatic for people.
Of course.
There are actually numerous recorded instances of riots at medical schools. Angry citizens smashing windows, literally attacking anatomists in the street when they suspected body snatching was happening.
Which perfectly sets up the literal closet part of this phrase.
Yes, it does.
Because imagine you're this respectable, prominent doctor. Maybe you're a leading surgeon in London or Edinburgh.
You've got a status to maintain.
Exactly. You have a public reputation to uphold. But to do your job, you have to secretly buy stolen human remains from shady criminals at 3 in the morning.
Right.
And you can't exactly just leave a cadaver sitting on your dining room table when the local magistrate stops by for afternoon tea.
You absolutely cannot. The utmost secrecy was required. Institutions, anatomists, and even individual medical students, they all had to find ways to quickly conceal the evidence of their illicit research.
So they hid them.
They did. We know for a fact from historical records that bodies and the skeletal remains left over after dissection were kept locked away in the storerooms, cellars, and cupboards of townhouses across Britain.
Literally skeletons in the closet.
Literally.
And the historical timeline perfectly overlaps, right? Because the body snatching epidemic peaked in the 1810s and 1820s.
Yes, right before the Anatomy Act of 1832 finally changed the laws.
Which is precisely when William Henry Stoll and others start using the phrase in their writing. It honestly gives me chills.
It really paints a picture.
It does. Every time we say someone has a skeleton in the closet because they, lied about knowing Excel on their resume, we are unknowingly referencing a Victorian doctor desperately shoving a freshly dug-up corpse into a wardrobe so the angry mob outside doesn't burn his house down.
It grounds the language in this visceral physical reality, doesn't it?
It really does.
And the medical history provides the perfect mechanism for the phrase's creation. However, and there is a however, as with any linguistic archaeology, stopping at the first plausible answer is dangerous.
Okay, throw the wrench in the gears. What is the problem with the medical theory?
Well, think about the logic of it. If the entire anatomist trade was driven by extreme secrecy and doctors were so terrified of the public finding out that they hid the bodies,
Oh, right.
how does that incredibly secretive practice become a widely understood, casual metaphor for the general public?
Oh, that's a good point.
An underground black market doesn't easily translate into an everyday idiom unless the public is already primed to understand the imagery.
Right, because if only a few hundred doctors are doing it and they are expressly not talking about it, why is an essayist in 1816 expecting his everyday readers to instantly get the reference?
Exactly. And to answer that, we have to look at the second major theory from the sources, the literary theory.
Okay, let's hear it.
We need to step away from the medical theaters and look at what the 19th century public was actually consuming for entertainment.
The cultural zeitgeist?
Precisely. The late 1700s and early 1800s, this was the golden age of the Gothic novel, and later, the penny dreadfuls.
So, popular fiction?
Yes, the reading public was ravenous for literature that explored the dark, the secretive, the gloomy, and the macabre.
This was the era of, crumbling castles, family curses, hidden passages, and a tremendous amount of dead bodies, right?
A staggering amount of dead bodies. Classic tales of the era frequently revolved around a central mechanic,
Yeah.
the concealment of a terrible crime.
Hiding the evidence.
Right. Writers realized that the psychological terror of a hidden corpse, knowing it's there but not seeing it, was far more suspenseful than the actual murder itself.
Okay, when I was going through the sources on this, my mind immediately jumped to Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, perfect example.
Right, specifically The Cask of Amontillado.
Yeah.
You don't even need to remember the whole plot from high school English class to remember the core claustrophobic terror of that story.
It sticks with you.
It does. The narrator doesn't just kill his rival. He chains him up in an alcove deep in the damp catacombs and methodically, brick by brick, seals him up inside the wall while he's still alive.
Right, he seals him away, entirely hidden from the world. It taps into a very specific, resonant human anxiety.
It is the ultimate concealed secret. And people just couldn't get enough of this stuff back then.
Not at all.
It's really not so different from our modern-day obsession with true crime podcasts or thriller movies. The public loved to be safely terrified by these provocative, scandalous stories about hidden murders and dark family secrets.
Exactly. And this literary theory posits that the phrase, skeleton in the closet, might simply be the perfectly evocative metaphor born from a society that was obsessed with reading about hidden corpses.
So it didn't even need to be real.
Right. It didn't necessarily require everyday people to know about anatomists hiding real bodies in their cupboards. It just required them to have read a few cheap Gothic thrillers where a villain hides a victim under the floorboards.
That makes complete sense. And we do this exact same thing with language today.
How so?
Well, think about the term gaslighting.
Oh, right.
It originally comes from a 1938 play and then a 1944 movie. about a husband manipulating the gas lights in his house to make his wife think she's losing her mind.
Right. It was a highly specific fictional plot device.
Exactly. And yet today, gaslighting is this ubiquitous term we use to describe, like, a toxic coworker or a bad roommate.
That's a great comparison.
A piece of fiction resonated so deeply with our modern psychological anxieties that it just bled into our everyday vocabulary.
And that's exactly what happened back then.
You're saying the Gothic obsession with hidden bodies did the exact same thing for the Victorians. A skeleton in the house became the shorthand for any dark, hidden secret.
It's a perfect analogy. And, if we pull back and synthesize these two theories, what we are really looking at is a massive cultural feedback loop.
A feedback loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a society surrounded by the concept of hidden death on multiple fronts.
So the real-world horror and the pop culture amplification working together.
Yes. The literature mirrored and heightened the societal anxieties of the time. The soil was just incredibly fertile.
It was everywhere.
Right. People were reading sensational Gothic fiction about hidden bodies at night, and then the very next morning, they were reading terrifying newspaper reports about resurrectionists robbing the local graveyard and anatomists performing secret dissections.
Wow. So when we look at the big picture here, the linguistic paper trail starting in 1816, the horrifying reality of the body snatchers, those bizarre legal loopholes with the church law, and the massive popularity of Gothic fiction, where do we ultimately land?
That's the big question.
Who officially gets the credit for inventing the phrase?
Well, the frustrating truth for any historian is that without finding, say, a diary entry from 1810 that explicitly says, I coined a new phrase today, and here's exactly why, we lack the definitive smoking gun.
So we'll never know for sure.
We can't point to one specific doctor or one specific author, no. But all the evidence points to a synthesis of the two theories.
It's both.
It's both. The phrase was born in an era where the concept of hiding human remains was both a sensational literary trope and a hushed, real-world scientific reality.
I love that. The actual literal corpses provided the shock and the stakes, and the popular literature provided the viral transmission that cemented it into the English language permanently.
Beautifully said. And it forces you to look at everyday language, not just as a tool for communication, but as a living museum of human history.
A living museum.
Yeah, every idiom carries a story, and some of those exhibits are far darker than we realize.
It really makes you appreciate the weight of the words we choose. Thank you for walking us through this incredibly dark, fascinating corner of the dictionary.
It was my pleasure.
But before you go about your day, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We just saw how one of our most common idioms, a phrase we toss around today at dinner parties without a second thought, was born from the most secretive, morally ambiguous, and frankly macabre practices of 19th century Britain.
The hidden horrors.
Right. A literal hidden horror turned into a casual conversational metaphor. So, consider the implications of that for a second. What hidden, taboo, or ethically questionable practices in our modern society are happening right now?
Well, that's a good question.
What secretive things occurring behind closed doors in massive cloud servers or data scraping farms or algorithmic behavioral labs are quietly evolving into the everyday catchphrases of the future? 200 years from now, what modern horror are people going to be casually referencing as a harmless metaphor, completely oblivious to the reality that birthed it?